I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I did not read for the first 16 days of February, and then I read 6 books in 10 days. If that's not ADHD, I don't know what it is. Hey, what's up y'all? It's Lyric from Lyric Reads, obviously. Thank you for clicking on this video and watching my dumb face, even though I know that only like 6 people are going to be watching this video. Today, I'm going to be doing a February wrap up. That is right. It's that time of the month. I'm not talking about my period. I'm talking about wrap-ups. So, let's just dive in and talk about what I read this month. So, the first book that I read that got me out of my reading slump was Looking for Alaska by John Green. This book is about a kid named Miles, otherwise known as Pudge, who goes to a boarding school looking for the great perhaps, trying to find some adventure and purpose and meaning in his life, if you know what I mean. He ends up going to this boarding school and he ends up meeting his roommate and this girl named Alaska Young, and they go on a bunch of adventures. It's basically about like his journey and his journey with Alaska. I liked this book. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Call me basic, I know, but I think John Green writes a damn good book. It won some sort of prize. Obviously, if it has one of these suckers, you know it's good. Now, the next book I read was actually an audiobook, and that was Olive by Emma Gannon, about a girl named Olive who is struggling with the idea of motherhood and whether or not she wants to be a mother, and realizing that she doesn't want to be a mother, and kind of just how she grapples with the fact that society tells women that we should be mothers and that we should want to be mothers. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. Overall, I enjoyed the story, but my main issue with it was the fact that I thought the main character was annoying. Every single goddamn thing in the book was about how she doesn't want to be a mother and how she feels like a freak because she doesn't want to be a mother. And oh, did she mention that she doesn't want to be a mother? And oh my gosh, the world is turning on me because I don't want to be a mother. And what should I do? Should I want to be a mother? You see how I'm repeating myself? That's the entire book. So while I enjoyed the story, I didn't really like the main character, which was difficult because we were reading her thoughts. She was the narrator in this book, so I was just constantly annoyed with the point of view of which I was reading, you know? That's why I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, but overall, it was a pretty good book. It was a pretty strong debut in my humble opinion. So the next book I read for the second time, boy oh boy, did it destroy me. I'm just gonna show it. I read A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and that does not mean that I recommend it to every single person on this planet. I think that there is a good chunk of the human population that should not read this book because it is triggering, it is traumatizing, it is trauma porn, it is deep, man. This book is heavy, and I'm not just saying it because it's like 800 pages and it's like physically heavy, it's also emotionally heavy. But also, I love this book the way I have never loved a book before, and I don't think I will ever be able to put to words the way that I love this book. I don't think I could fully even just start to explain to you what this book means to me. The writing, gorgeous. Jude St. Francis, my child. Willem, Harold, Andy, my children. I love this book with my whole chest. That does not mean I think you should read it. I think you should look up the content warnings, and if you think that you can read a book like that, then read it. But if you think that this book is going to give you trauma or bring up trauma in you, skip this one. Regardless, I love this book with my whole chest, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The third book I read was for my book club at school, and it was Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This was our pick for February. I think most people know what this book is about. It's basically just talking about like justice and the justice system, specifically the death penalty. I liked this book a lot. I think the information and the stories in this book are valuable to learn. Like, I think everybody should read this book for the information and the stories alone. What I did not like about this book was the fact that it did not make me want to keep reading. This book is filled with a lot of like information and statistics and facts, and so I think that Bryan should have tried to make it interesting so then the everyday Joe who was wanting to read this book and learn a little something about racism in the justice system would actually be inclined to read it, but he did not. And I found myself struggling to get through this book. I think it's a great book. I think everybody should read it, but it's just not the most interesting. So I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read, I literally read in 2.5 hours, and that was This Is Where It Ends. I'm not even going to try to say this author's name. I'm just going to put it down here. But this is a story about a school shooter in a high school. It changes perspectives from the main characters, like, constantly. This book was really good. It was suspenseful. It kept me engaged from beginning to end. I read it in 2.5 hours. Like I said, it was a really good time. It was a really fast and enjoyable read. I just did not care about the characters, because we didn't have any context or background into these characters' lives prior to when this book takes place. And I'm sitting here reading it, and I'm like, why do I care about these characters dying or not dying? And then once I got halfway through the book, I had read these characters for about 100 pages now, so I'm like, okay, now I care about them. But I really think that the author could have added more context and background into these characters' lives to make me care about them right from the beginning. But other than that, I think it was a really good book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. That was my only real issue with it. Like I said, I really enjoyed this book, and I read it in 2.5 hours, and I cried at the end. So that's the true marker of a good book. Last book. I finished this one this morning, but I only read like 25 pages this morning, so I basically finished it last night, still in February, so I'm gonna count it. And that was Writers and Lovers by Lily King. This is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. I cannot wait to reread this book and to really just like take it all in, and to annotate it and all that jazz, because this book was just so beautiful. And the way that this author told Case's story was just absolutely gorgeous, and I just really liked it. I liked the way it ended. I liked it from beginning to end. I was so invested in the characters. This was just 5 out of 5, top tier, really good book. So highly recommend this one. Okie dokie, that's all of the books that I read in February. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope you had fun listening to me talk about books that I read. If you want to continue watching me talk about books, I suggest that you subscribe and maybe even like this video if you're feeling a little zesty. What? So like this video if you're feeling a little zesty, maybe even leave a comment. I love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Lyric, and yeah.